Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cheryl Tolentino, Supervising Prevention Consultant of NJ4S Union Hub. I'm hoping you're enjoying this nice summer-like day, but I'm glad that you're able to join us today, whether you're outside or inside, on the last of our series of the Blossom and Bloom webinar series. And it will be presented by our own clinician, Vonetta McDonald, who will talk about emotional wellness and how that could benefit us when we tap into our emotions, and how trauma and stress can affect it, and how to bolster our emotional reservoirs so that we can tackle any kind of situation, be resilient. And this is a leadway to our mental health awareness month next month in May. And hopefully you'll be able to join us on those Mondays. And it's called Going Beyond Awareness. So hopefully you'll chime in and make sure you take a note to attend those sessions. But let me tell you a little bit about our lovely presenter and clinician. Vonetta McDonald is a licensed social worker with both a bachelor's in social work and psychology and a master's degree in social work, which both got those degrees at Rutgers. She has 7 years of clinical experience working with individuals and families. She especially enjoys working with young adults, implementing cognitive behavioral tools and techniques. But she continues to enjoy her work with adolescents who are being served by the NJ4S Union Hub. In her leisure time, she enjoys listening to music and spending time with her family. So, no longer for you to wait, let's have Miss Vonetta McDonald please provide us with our emotional wellness presentation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us for our last installment of the Blossom and Bloom Mental Health and Nature. I'm focusing on the mental health. So let me share my screen. I don't know what happened. So my presentation is on emotional health. My title is Tending to Emotional Guarding. I have to give credit to Ben for helping me with the title. So Ben, thank you. So emotional health is an important part of our overall health. Individuals who are emotionally healthy are in control of their thoughts, their feelings, and behavior. So today, my objective is, to define emotional well-being. What are our emotions, emotional wellness in the brain, stress, trauma, and emotional wellness, and how to identify steps to take to achieve emotional well-being. So what is emotional wellness? I know we probably all have our own definitions, but the National Center for Emotional Wellness defines emotional wellness as an awareness, an understanding, and acceptance of our feelings, and our ability to manage difficulty, to manage effectively through challenges and changes. And what I think emotional wellness is to me is, it doesn't mean that we're immune from sadness, disappointments, challenges that we experience. It means that, we're capable of, feeling our feelings. We're able to label our feelings. We're able to deal with strong emotions, if it's positive or negative. Emotionally healthy people still feel, like I mentioned, still feel anger, disappointment, sadness. But the key to all this is they know how to manage their negative feelings. And they also know that if they're unable to manage their negative feelings, they can seek out help, like find a therapist, a trusting friend. I know what our definition is with the National Center for Emotional Health. Does anyone else think of, when you think about being emotionally well, what comes to your mind? If anyone wants to kind of chime in.
Being in balance.
I'm sorry,
stay in a well stable balance, emotional balance.
Yeah. Anyone
Just
else?
being calm, just being calmed and relaxed.
And I said, like I could mention, like, being aware. A lot of us are not aware of our emotions. Sometimes we don't even know how to explain what we're feeling. But when you're able to do that, you're able to better manage those strong negative emotions that come up every so often. Now, okay, what are emotions? Emotions are reactions that individuals experience in response to events or situations. So if I'm feeling happy, definitely it's because something I've experienced made me feel happy. But sometimes we don't know, when people are unhappy, they're sad, whatever they're going through at that moment in time, it triggers their emotion, and it triggers how they behave, with others and even with themselves. Emotions have strong influence on our daily lives. We make decisions based on whether we're happy, whether we're sad, bored, frustrated. It's also, we also choose activities based on our emotions. Can anyone think of, when you're happy, when you're sad, what type of things do you like to do? Or what type of things you don't like to do based on how you're feeling at that particular time?
I'll chime in. I think something that I've noticed people do is if you're sad, you may scroll on your phone a lot to help not feel that negative feeling. So it's almost like a coping skill.
Yeah, you're distracting
yourself. Just avoid it. Yeah.
But here's that thing, avoiding our feelings sometimes is not the best thing to do, So right now, what emotions are you feeling right now? For me, I'm feeling nervous. When I'm feeling nervous, I they say you feel butterflies in your stomach. I do feel butterflies in my stomach, but I also feel like I start sweating, because of my anxiousness, my nervousness. So what is everyone feeling right now? I know the weather's beautiful outside, so I'm sure we're all happy that, it's not raining. So what emotions come to you right now? Like, what are you feeling? One?
Being hopeful.
Said what?
Hopeful.
Hopeful? Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good feeling. And how does being hopeful affect your thoughts and your decisions? Or if it doesn't, and
well, it comes like, a passive emotion and seeing like positivity, in the future and all of that.
Okay, so that leads me to my next slide. Why is emotional wellness important? Other than what I have on here, I have, emotional wellness is important, because it fosters resilience. A lot of people who have been through a lot, they somehow, look at the positive and they keep pushing forward, regardless of the things that happened in their past, regardless of things that are currently happening, they always have like a positive outlook, which helps them to kind of overcome things faster than other people who hadn't fostered resilience. It's always helpful to cope with stress. Being emotional well, helps us to cope with stress. When you're feeling stressed at work, I know we all have families, we have friends, and sometimes, it can be very stressful juggling family, work. So being able to do that, helps us to handle stress much better than others. It also fosters deeper relationships, meaning when you're able to communicate with your loved ones, with your friends, your family, when you're able to communicate how you feel, it's easier for you to, number one, be around people, and for people to be around you, because you're able to communicate to them what you're feeling. You're also able to resolve conflicts. Physical health. It's very important for us to be able to have emotional wellness, because when we are stressed, it causes high blood pressure, you're not being physically active. Again, physical meaning, there's stress, mental health, anxiety, depression. But when we're able to manage our anxiety, when we're able to manage our sadness, it helps us emotionally. The quality of your life. If you're stressed and having mental health issues, and you're not able to cope with stress, you're having, strife in your relationships, it's very hard for you to be able to, function on a daily basis. And, I think I touched on some things that can prevent us from having emotional health. One of the big ones that I think is important is, early childhood experiences. Depending on the family you grew up in, if it was loving, you might, you're able to function better, within your family, within relationships. But if you grow up in a household that is kind of chaotic, there's no love, there's no affection, there's no communication, or there is communication, but the type of communication that a child is receiving when they're young that is negative can have a very negative impact on them as they're growing up. Then we also have, emotional wound, which is trauma. Growing up in a physically abusive household, or even witnessing abuse, domestic violence, even car accidents, that's traumatic. Being in a car accident can be traumatic for someone. If you have anxiety and depression, that's also, if it's not controlled, you can't really function on a day-to-day basis. And again, repeated stressors. Sometimes our job is stressful. Sometimes our family is stressful. So being able to manage difficult situations, has an overall effect, if we're not able to manage overall effect on our emotional health and our environment. When I say environment, it can be your neighborhood you grew up in. It could be a school environment, your household, depending on what's going on. Substance use is not helpful. It hinders us from having good emotional health. People who indulge in substance use, they do it to numb themselves. They don't want to feel, they don't want to feel those hurt feelings, those negative feelings. So in order for them to kind of cope and make it through the day, through the month, through the night, is turning to substance. So my next slide is a video, and it kind of gives you like some insight into our emotions and actually where it stems from. Let me know if you can hear the video, please. Give me a thumbs up.
When we hear the word emotion, most of us think of love, hate, happiness, or fear. Those strong feelings we experience throughout life. Our emotions are the driving force behind many of our behaviors, helpful and unhelpful. Just where do our emotions come from? Our brain is wired to look for threats or rewards. If one is detected, the feeling region of the brain alerts us through the release of chemical messages. Emotions are the effect of these chemical messages traveling from our brain through the body. When our brain detects a potential threat, our brain releases the stress hormones adrenaline and cortisol, which prepare us for a fight or flight response. When we detect or experience something rewarding, such as someone doing something nice for you, our brain releases dopamine, oxytocin, or serotonin. These are the chemicals that make us feel good and motivate us to continue on the task or behavior. In these instances, the feeling region of the brain kicks in before the thinking part. Sometimes the reactions of the feeling brain are so strong that it dominates our behaviors, and we're unable to think rationally in the moment. Our emotions hijack our brain. While many of our emotional responses happen subconsciously, our thinking can influence our emotions, and sometimes this can be unhelpful. Just thinking about something threatening can trigger an emotional response. This is where we can manage our emotions with conscious thinking. Our emotions play a powerful role in the way we experience the world. Understanding and regulating our emotions through our thoughts and behaviors can help us take greater control of our brain and achieve our goals.
So, what did everyone think about that video? What I personally got from that video was emotions are believed to have an adaptive purpose. Some help us to respond to real life threats like fear and anxiety. Some help us to draw between what is right and what is wrong, like anger and frustration. I also noted that, fear is an indicator, that danger, that we have danger, but sometimes I think when our minds, they alert us to danger when danger is not even there. So in those moments when danger is not even there, our mind is overstimulated and we're not able to think rationally or act in a way that we would normally behave if we were able, to think rationally. I also think that, in doing my research on emotional wellness, I came across a lot of information about our brain, and our brain is very emotional. The limbic system, which has the amygdala, it automatically detects danger. Fear is the main emotion controlled by this part of our brain, and it is that part of our brain where the fight, flight, or freeze takes over. Another part of our brain that controls emotions is our prefrontal cortex. That is the logical part of our brain. We make decisions. There's learning, reflection, planning, regulation. It helps us to regulate. However, when we are in fight, flight, and freeze, that part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, it doesn't function properly because the amygdala part of our brain takes over. Like he mentioned, our brain sometimes get hijacked, by our emotions. And again, just some more information about our emotional side of the brain, which is the amygdala, is the region of the brain that primarily associated with emotional responses. The amygdala role is to determine if our survival is threatened. And if so, it secretes the stress hormones that initiate, again, that fight, flight, or freeze. It links our emotions to many other brain activities. So we also have the part of the limbic system, which also plays a role in our emotions, is the hippocampus. The hippocampus is where all our memory is stored. So sometimes when people are triggered by certain things, it could be a smell, a scent, a person, that part of our brain kind of kicks in, where it's like the emotional part. Well, they call it the emotional memories kicks in. It also determines how we act in crisis depending on the information it receives. It helps us to recognize emotion in ourselves and in others. When overwhelmed with stress, the amygdala, it takes over the brain's response to the situation. It plays a large part in the symptoms of depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized and social anxiety disorders, panic attacks, and obsessive compulsive disorders. When that part of the brain is overly stimulated, your anxiety outweighs the logical part of your brain and causes us to panic. I also mentioned, stress, trauma in the brain. When we are in a heightened state of fear, and we're kind of like fighting for survival because there's things going on that we can't control. The prefrontal cortex of our brain, which is the logical thinking part, it actually shrinks, and the emotional part of our brain, which is the amygdala function, it increases. And it increases cortisol and adrenaline. That's why sometimes when you're stressed, sometimes when we're stressed, we have all these feelings in our body. We sweat a lot. We're sweating a lot because we're stressed out. We can't control our emotions. When repeated stress or trauma, when we experience repeated stress and trauma, the flight, fight, and freeze becomes the main communication system. Like I mentioned before, although we have the prefrontal cortex, which is our logical side of our brain, which helps us with decision making, thinking, when we are stressed and we're in a fight, fight, and freeze, that's the main communication system that's running, and that's the emotional side. We don't have, sometimes if you think back to a time where you felt frightened or you were afraid, if you have ever experienced trauma, there's no time for thinking. Your thinking is based on, I need to survive what's going on. So the logical part of our brain, which gives us pause to stop, think, and react, that's not in control. The emotional side of our brain gains all that control. Again, when I was, doing some research, it shows that adults with PTSD have a reduction in the prefrontal cortex and a reduction of the volume of the hippocampus, which I mentioned before. Hippocampus is the memory part of our brain. In the absence of these mechanisms, adults with PTSD feel overwhelmed with stress and anxiety, even in the absence of danger. So imagine someone with PTSD who constantly is reliving a traumatic experience, even if it's not happening. And that's because their emotional side of the brain, either it's remembering something, it's stimulated by, like I said, like by a scent, by a person, a place, so people with PTSD have a very hard time controlling, that part of their brain. Again, as I mentioned, trauma in the brain, during trauma, the logical part of our brain is blocked. There's no time to think. There's only time to react. The body remains on high alert long after the trauma has passed. The nervous system of people who experience chronic trauma adjusts to high levels of stress hormones, and they organize their lives. And I'm sure some of us know maybe some people who have lived through traumatic events, but presently they're still living as if, they're in survival mode every single day. The nervous system is chronically overstimulated by the stress response, and an individual either overreacts or shut down. I could think a lot of people, even with some of the students I deal with, sometimes they're not able to manage their emotions. So a lot of times they overreact to little things that they shouldn't, or sometimes they shut down. And why is that? Because the emotional side of the brain is controlling everything that they're doing. So again, the frontal cortex is unavailable to effectively respond. The logical thought process and executive functions of inhibition, working memory, and problem-solving ability, that's what the prefrontal cortex helps us with. But when we're overly stimulated and we're only functioning with that emotional side of our brain, we don't have time to think logically. Trauma increases the risk of misinterpreting whether a particular situation is dangerous or safe. This faulty alarm system leads to emotional explosion or shutdown in response to situation, comments, facial expressions, body language. My next video, I think I can only speak for myself, but my next video, the logical and emotional side of the brain, when I saw this video, it just made sense to me the way it's really simplified so anyone can understand how the emotional side of our brain functions versus the logical side of our brain function. So we'll watch the video and have a little discussion on the upstairs and downstairs brain. Let me know if you can hear.
Your brain is powerful and strong. It helps you remember that 2 + 2 = 4, makes you blink and breathe without even thinking, and even helps you play your favorite video games. But it's so much more than that too. Your brain has 3 main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. It also has 2 sides, a left and a right, 4 lobes, the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. And then each of these lobes can be broken down even more into areas that have specific jobs. Yowza, that's a lot of pieces. Let's see if we can make it a bit easier to understand. You can think of your brain kind of like a 2-story house. In this house, there's an upstairs and a downstairs. The upstairs and downstairs brains both have very important jobs. Your downstairs brain's job is to keep you safe. It is responsible for things like breathing, super strong emotions like anger and fear, and watching out for danger. The upstairs brain's job is to help you think. Yep, that's right. Its job is to help you problem solve, learn, and make good decisions. A house wouldn't be a home without people inside, right? Your brain has some characters in it that play a really important role in what you're thinking, feeling, and doing. Let's talk about the characters in the downstairs brain first. Down here, you have alerting Annie. She lets us know if there's danger nearby. Angry Albert. He responds really quickly with, you guessed it, anger. And frightened Fred. He's pretty much scared of everything, but it's because he wants to keep us safe. Then there's the boss. This is Big Boss Bob. His job is to take information from Albert, Annie, and Fred and react. There is no thinking involved. He just listens to them, and if they say danger is nearby, he acts super fast. Bob does this in 3 different ways: fight, flight, or freeze. Your upstairs brain has some characters in it too. Up here, you have problem-solving Patty. She helps recognize problems and come up with solutions. Calming Carl. His job is to help us calm down when we're upset. Flexible Felix. He allows us to go with the flow. And focusing Frank. He allows us to pay attention and learn. All of these characters don't act super fast. It takes time for them to stop and think before doing anything. Any house with an upstairs and downstairs has a staircase that connects them, right? So does your brain house. We need both the upstairs and downstairs brains to work together. When the brain's staircase is built and strong, our characters can move up and down the staircase to share information. This allows the upstairs brain to try and make sense of strong emotions from Albert, Annie, and Fred, and try to figure out how to help. But it's not always that easy. You see, even though your downstairs brain is done being built when you're born, your upstairs brain is under construction until you're in your mid-20s, which means your staircase can be kind of fragile as a kid. And Bob is kind of bossy, so when he thinks that danger is around, he may flip a switch to break your staircase in order to keep you safe, even when there's no actual danger around. Let's look at it this way. Let's pretend that you are out at recess. The sun is shining, it's nice and warm out, and you're playing with your friends. All of a sudden, a cute little kitten wanders on the playground. Annie, Fred, and Albert are going to say, "Aw, look at that cute kitten." Bob will send a message upstairs to say, "Everyone, look, it's a cute little kitten." Bob doesn't sense any danger, so problem-solving Patty is able to stop and think about what to do next. Patty decides that you should probably go and tell the teacher that the kitten is on the playground. Maybe it's lost and your teacher can help get it home. Awesome! The upstairs and downstairs brain worked together to solve the problem. Now, let's take the same day at recess, but add something different. Instead of a kitten that shows up, a giant T-Rex stomps onto the scene. Annie immediately goes over to Bob and says, Bob, we have a problem." Fred does the same thing, saying, "There's a dinosaur on the playground." Bob has no time to go upstairs so Patty can figure out what to do. Instead, he flips the switch to break the staircase and responds super fast by having you run away, flight, and hide, freeze, inside of the school. So clearly Bob is really good at acting fast to keep us safe. Unfortunately, your brain, and Bob in particular, cannot tell the difference between a hard question on a math test and a dinosaur on the playground, especially when Bob flips his switch to break the staircase. But guess what? You can make your staircase stronger by practicing calming strategies like deep breathing and learning how to relax your muscles. The more you practice these when you feel good, the more likely Bob is to respond to them when your feelings get too big. Trusted adults can also act as carpenters for your broken staircase, rebuilding each step to help Bob reach Patty and solve the problem together. Teachers and parents, for more information about the upstairs.
Yeah, so when I think about the upstairs and downstairs brain and, the staircase and all, and then the illustration, I feel like the emotional response that we have, those outbursts, not being able to control our emotions, our staircase, like how they mentioned in the video, it breaks the staircase to the logical part of our brain, which gives us time to pause, think, and react. That doesn't come into play when we're overstimulated and we're having like emotional breakdown. So as they mentioned, if the way to kind of keep this staircase intact is to learn how to regulate our emotions, which kind of brings me into my next slide. Emotional regulation. So in order for us to be able to not have our staircase break is to practice certain things to help us to regulate our emotions. And in the first 3 years of children's lives is where they're building that foundation for regulating emotions. They're looking at their parents, their caregivers to teach them. And that's in the form of modeling, how to communicate, showing love and affection, talking to your child when your child is upset versus ignoring, yelling, screaming. When we do that, we're not giving our children the tools to be able to self-soothe themselves when they're going through, tough times. Regular emotion means we have the ability to manage negative feelings. Sometimes it's based on genetics. Sometimes we're all predisposed to act and behave in a certain way, but with learning new skills, we'll be able to manage that. Your natural temperament. Are you a type of person that, you're laid back, so you don't allow things to fester and get underneath your skin? Or are you the type of person where, you react quickly? Just because, that's just who you are as a person. You're not going to sit there and let someone either talk to you in a disrespectful way or do things to you and you're just going to lay back and not do anything. The environment we grew up in, our household. What type of household did you grow up in? And not to say that every household, that if you grow up in a negative household, you're going to grow up to not be able to, regulate out your emotions. But in most instances, when people are in an environment that they grow up in and it's a negative environment, there's yelling, there's no one there to comfort you and to, communicate with you when you're feeling a certain way. That can play into you as you become an adult. And they say, like, the outside factors, sometimes when we're tired and we're hungry, we get upset because we're just running on being hungry and tired. So no matter what is going on around us, we're not going to be in our best moods. Emotional regulation is the ability to exert control over our own emotional state. It is up to us to be able to manage how we respond to people, because at the end of the day, we do have a choice. It involved behaviors such as, rethinking, like taking a step back from the situation and rethinking it, and challenging your situation. Is it dangerous? Is it anxiety? You can hide visible signs of sadness or fear. It also is practicing and cultivating, sacred buffers of time between the feeling of emotions and your reaction to that emotion. Again, I often think that how we react to what people say, what people do, it's our choice. Either you choose to respond in a negative way or you choose to respond in a way that lets that person know that I'm not going to tolerate what you said or what you did, but you're not going to do it in a way that makes you're not thinking about it. You're just emotionally reacting to that person. How do we improve emotional well-being or emotional wellness? We're able to identify and reduce triggers. That means for me, if I know that there's a particular person or a particular situation that is going to trigger me, either I'm going to avoid her or I'm going to find a way to work through that situation or those triggers. Tuning into physical symptoms. We all know when we're upset and angry. There's certain things that our body goes through to let us know that we're upset and angry. So just paying attention to those moments where you feel that you're getting angry, you have time to think about how you're gonna, respond. If we engage in positive self-talk, sometimes we're our worst critic. Something bad can happen and we just focus on that bad and we tell ourselves like, oh, you should have did this or you should have did that, instead of saying, you know what, that happened and I'm going to take this as a learning lesson, and next time, I'll find a different way to do better. And again, make a choice about how to respond. And it's not all these things that is listed, it's not easy to do. With practice and over time of practicing, I think individuals are able to build those skills of emotional regulation, building those skills of how to make a choice about how to respond. Because sometimes we want to respond and it might not be in the right way. So taking that time to even thinking about, if I say this might happen. kind of like, talking yourself is basically like talking yourself down. And in those times when we're not able to do any of this, seeking out a therapist, that it can be very beneficial and helpful, because when you're able to, meet with a therapist, they're able to talk to you and kind of give you those skills. There's grounding exercises, there's activities that they can help you deep breathe. There's activities for them to help you be able to calm your muscles when you're feeling tense. And prioritizing, self-care. Sometimes there's a lot going on. We all have a lot going on in our life, and it's easy to tell someone hey, you need to prioritize yourself. You need to, take time out for you. It's very easy for me to say, but it's also hard for me to do. So just being more conscious of, yourself and what you need in order for you to function on a daily basis. There's yoga, meditation, music, art, dance, exercise. And also, going outside, going for a nature walk. Sometimes being outside and getting that fresh air, it helps us to think, and when we start to think about a situation, we're able to process it in a better frame of mind. And getting enough sleep, when we're all stressed and tired, sometimes we're not able to think clearly. So getting enough sleep would, something that would be helpful. And try communicating your thoughts and your feelings with someone you trust. Because a lot of times holding in your feelings is not the best thing to do. Finding someone who you trust to share how you're feeling, it can take the weight off of your shoulder, take the weight off of your mind. And I want to leave you with this. One of the best lessons you can learn in life is to master how to remain calm. Again, this is easy for me to say, and but it's hard for people to do, even hard for me to do. So I'm going to end this with emotional wellness inspires self-care, relaxation, stress reduction, and the development of inner strength. It is important to be attentive to both positive and negative feelings and be able to understand how to handle these emotions. Emotional wellness also includes the ability to learn and grow from experiences. Emotional well-being, encourage autonomy and prosper decision-making skills is an important part of our overall wellness. Your body has a physical response to stress and trauma. So part of our work with stress and trauma is to regulate our body and our mind. Thank you for sitting in on this webinar. Appreciate it.